마지막으로 오클랜드 유니서비스 전략성장부의 켈빈 케 디렉터님이 뉴질랜드가 생각하는 글로벌 협력 바이오 헬스케어 정책이라는 주제로 발표해 주시겠습니다.
Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Kelvin Keh. I'm the Director for Strategic Growth at UniServices. So just very quickly, whilst I'm talking and giving examples from UniServices, the ways of engagement largely applies across New Zealand, and some of the capabilities that I'm showing you exist across New Zealand in a very connected way. So just a very quick slide about who we are. In very simple terms, UniServices is the university's commercialization company. To give you an idea of scale, we employ more than 500 people, and we currently work in over 45 different countries. And I'll come to some of the other figures at a later slide. So I've got a couple of slides around broad drug discovery capabilities in New Zealand. This is a very busy slide, so I'll pick out a couple of things to focus on. So New Zealand itself has a very strong and illustrious track record in oncology drug discovery. So we've shown that there are a great collection of capabilities around platforms such as peptides or ADCs, prodrugs, etc. And I'll show you some examples later on. But more recently, there's also been a growth of preclinical capabilities across emerging areas such as infectious diseases and neuroscience. And largely, some of this is because of the unique capabilities that we have here. So just to pick up one example, a lot of the neuroscience drug discovery activity revolves around the New Zealand Human Brain Bank. And one of the unique things that we have in New Zealand is that the consent system is an all or nothing process. So when you consent to donate your brain, you are also then donating your clinical history alongside that. So what we have with the Human Brain Bank is a very rich set of information, right through from genetic data set, clinical history, but also human brain tissue and cells. So from a research perspective and from a discovery perspective, that gives us a lot of flexibility in how we can utilize that tool. So just to pick out an example, the Auckland Cancer Society Research Centre itself, which is one particular research centre within the University of Auckland, they have developed 17 first-in-class compounds that has entered into clinic. And much of this is done over the last sort of roughly 30 years. So there is some very good track record, particularly in medicinal chemistry. And although we are proud of the 17 from this particular center, it's also worth noting that we've also worked with industry to improve their compounds across a number of different indications. So for example, in the area of oncology, for ADCs, for example, there's been a lot of capabilities developed over the years in the area of creation of novel toxins and the use of novel toxins in different drugs. It's worth pointing out, just for a sense of scale, at the University of Auckland through UniServices in the last 10 years, we've created about 45 different countries and licensed over 430 patent families, and that's a single institution. So, and you know, there are other similar institutions across the country as well. And the other part, I think, that is quite attractive from a New Zealand perspective, and what's been a growing interest for international companies is the use of New Zealand as a clinical trials destination, if you like. So my colleague Kevin touched on the connectivity of the healthcare system. It does lend itself to some fairly unique and effective trial readouts. So it really depends as well on the types of trials that you're looking to run. You know, you can get some fairly valuable insights from a connected healthcare system like we have in New Zealand. It's also a fairly comparatively cheap place to run clinical trials, and it's even made more attractive through the use of the new R&D tax credits. So if anyone's interested in this, we'd be quite happy to put you in touch with our colleagues at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. But we have seen quite a growing set of interest in the use of the New Zealand population for clinical trials. So these are all great, and you know, I think every country has its own spot, and as do we in New Zealand. From an institution perspective, what we aim to do is ultimately to create, using advancing our knowledge, to create market disruption. And we do this in two sort of broad ways. The first way that we would do this is what you might consider a technology transfer office to do. We invest in early stage technology, and then we push that out to the market. And I'll give you two examples. So Rain Therapeutics is a company based in the US. We've licensed to them one of the compound that was discovered here. In this particular case, we've also invested into Rain. And so last year, we've entered phase 2 clinical trials, and the preliminary results are currently very encouraging. So we do quite a bit of out-licensing work, as you'd expect. The other way that we would push a novel platform out to the company is simply through spinning out companies. And here's a selection of our companies that we spun out in the last 10 years or so. And, you know, I think these are quite standard ways, if you like, for institutions to engage with the industry at large. I think what's quite novel about the way that we work is we also bring industry into the university environment and into our research groups. So to give you an idea of ratio, for every spin out that we do, we would license roughly 10 licenses. And for every 10 licenses, we would do roughly 100 industry collaboration. So by far and away, that's the bulk of what we do. And I'll pick out two examples here. So the first example is with a company based in San Francisco called Cotexime. We engaged in a series of joint research projects, and this was one of the publications that we published together last year. And the really interesting thing about Cotexime is that they have a very novel hypothesis on what caused Alzheimer's. And their entire drug development program was based on that premise. And so we did some fairly novel work with them, leveraging on both our skill set and resources in what they have. I think we're very proud, both the company and us, to say that this particular piece of work is ranked number 36 in the most discussed research work of last year. So that's quite a significant body of work for both parties. The other example I wanted to point out is with a company called Living Cell Technology. LCT is a New Zealand biotech company. We licensed to them a migraine drug, but we've also entered into a research partnership to develop all the preclinical data pack with the view of entering clinic in 2021. And I think this is a very nice example because, you know, whilst we have sort of broad modalities on how we'd like to engage, we are quite flexible to the needs of the particular companies that we work with. And I think the beauty about New Zealand is that because we are a fairly small country, the connectivity between the different institutions and between the local ecosystems and the institutions are very good in that you can achieve quite a bit in a very tight-knit ecosystem. Finally, I just want to point out that, you know, whilst, as I said earlier, a lot of the examples are from UniServices, the broad principles apply to the other institutions across the country. Thank you.